Not only is he musically exceptional, it's amazing. When Artie shows up anywhere, he shows up to play.
He's American, playing for the genre, for Latino genre, and creating magic, and playing with the legends of not only American music, Latin music, and everything. Why he's not famous?
Well, he played with Norman Connors, he played with Stanley Clarke, with Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock. I would have to go to my list real quick.
Great role model for the young generation musicians.
He's got that triple tonguing and quadruple tonguing and things that other flute players just can't do. You might even think it's not possible for a human to do it that fast.
The whole of Los Angeles, like the level of playing, is higher because of Artie.
Art's one of those guys that you just couldn't not be his friend. There would have to be something wrong with you to not be Art Webb's friend.
Art has always been a legend. All the recording albums that he's done and stuff.
Art is definitely a legend, without a doubt.
Art Webb is a legend. He's a legend at what he does, and maybe he'll be a legend for you too.
My name is Arthur Trisman Webb, Jr., born in the city of Philadelphia, September 24th, 1950. I was accepted to take music lessons in elementary school. My music teacher at the time, his name was Lee Chance, advised me to tell my mother to take me to a music store to buy a flute. We went to look for a student model flute that cost about $80, and she got it on a layaway plan. And so then I was able to take lessons, and I was pretty happy and excited about it at the time. My mother didn't have to force me to practice. It came naturally. My mother was a musician. She played the piano, and she had a beautiful singing voice. And she taught my sister and I had to sing and perform at Tom Thumb weddings, and we performed in churches around the Philadelphia area. My father always appreciated our skills as musicians, but he more or less couldn't carry a tune. We were a working poor family in Philadelphia. The way we existed, we weren't aware so much about our socioeconomic status, but we were a pretty happy family. We as children never missed any meals. We were very lucky in that respect.
His mom was an educator. I think she was a big name in Philadelphia public schools. And so Artie's education, Artie's a product of the Philadelphia public schools, as was McCoy Tyner and I think Stanley Clarke.
Philadelphia was a beautiful town for musicians. It was rich culturally, you know. Each school, high school, elementary school, junior high school, had a full orchestra, and like music was a very important thing. Music, art, dance. And so a lot of the young musicians that were pretty good, we all knew each other.
There were some local great musicians that were making an impact nationally and internationally.
I remember we used to go around the college that we went to, and there were no jazz programs there, but we would play this piece, and we played it in unison, and we'd play it so perfect, so precise, so fast sometimes. And all the classical musicians used to look at us and go, who are these guys? What are they doing? What is that piece? How are they doing it like that? And I want to be able to do it.
They were the only two that were experimenting between doing classical music and wanting to play jazz. So of course they, had a bond and all that stuff. So then Stanley tells me, I grew up with Artie, man. We were the two African-American kids in the classical world back in the 70s in Philly. It was us two.
So playing with Stanley Clarke, he was always advanced. And he's just the greatest of the greats, even when we were students.
I love playing with Art. I hope to play with him again some more in the future.
When I was 17, I was encouraged to go to New York by Tony Molina. Philadelphia is 90 miles away from New York, so you could fill up the tank of a Volkswagen for $3. And so we would drive to New York just to see musicians play. And I would go with one or two other friends, or if I didn't drive to New York, I would take the Amtrak train. So that was my introduction to the New York musicians. So Mauricio Smith mentored me to the point where he got me my first job performing with a band at a club called the Alibaba on 59th and the 1st Avenue. At the time he was playing the Broadway show No No Nanette, and he couldn't play 5 or 6 nights a week on Broadway and then 5 or 6 nights a week at the Alibaba. I more or less had a permanent job at the Alibaba, paid $200 a week. That was my introduction to New York City.
I actually remember when he was hit with the Latin music bug. We thought, okay, now he's going to pose as a Cuban. Now, I know it. He's going to be Arturo. He started speaking Spanish. None of us could speak Spanish. He's starting to fragmentally speak Spanish. I'm going, what is wrong with Art?
But as soon as I heard him starting to speak Spanish, Puerto Rican slang, street lingo, oh my God, you're my brother then, because he had it right. He had it down pat.
But he had a love for that music, and then a beautiful thing happened to him. He met Ray Barretto.
3 of Ray Barretto's musicians, they had been bar hopping at the time, came to the Alibaba, and they stumbled upon me and heard me play. During our conversation, they invited me to come to the Corso, the home of Latin music, on 86th and 3rd Avenue. It has one of the talents of all of the musicians who were members of the Fania All-Stars. They told me that if I had a night off to come to the Corso to see them play. I went to the Corso and they recognized me right away. They immediately got Ray Barretto's attention. They said, Ray, this guy plays the flute. You should bring him up on stage. And then he invited me up. When I got up on stage to play, all the dancers stopped what they were doing and came to the front of the stage. And when I finished playing, they gave me like just a huge round of applause. And Ray asked me, he says, what is your name? And so I told him, Arthur Webb. And from there, Ray pretty much hired me on the spot. He asked me to join the band.
Numerous conversations with Ray. I don't think that Ray ever hired somebody who wasn't the best.
Ray really embraced him. I remember I was doing some sessions in those days, and sometimes Ray was on those sessions, and he would always go, yeah, man, Artie, man. Artie. You know, he loved Artie.
I had to take a cut in salary. I went from making $200 a week to $85 a week. But it was worthwhile because I was playing with a musician who was a star. He made us a promise that the money would get better, which it did. And after recording The Other Road and Indestructible, and then we went from making $85 a weekend to $500, $600, or $700 a week from that point on.
It is one of the most beautiful albums ever, people. Ray got a great New York Puerto Rican arranger, and it's the fucking best. Artie Webb's on it. I know that guy, Artie Webb. But this album also has Artie on it. So I had to back up before this album. Fucking Artie Webb. So pretty, so rhythmical, and what's the killer tune, Canto Abacoa? And I know Johnny Polanco played that tune with Artie on it, but I'm telling you, this is an album for the ages.
And you know, it wasn't just Barretto, it was also Artie can jump in with the best of the bands, including Puente, Tito Puente, and all the other bands who were playing at the Corso.
His input in the 70s in New York with, you know, monster percussionists, trumpet players, trombone players. Artie was there.
I knew who Artie was before people told me about him. I saw his name on records. I knew he was in the SAR All-Stars and that he was playing with Barretto and a lot of famous people. And I knew he was the flute player on Caballo Viejo. That song, if you were a Latin musician at that time, that song was kind of a thorn in your side. That was a song that everybody needled you to play constantly. You know, you would play it, and a drunk would come up to the bandstand and say, Caballo Viejo, and you had just gotten done playing it. You know, but that was Artie. He was the flute player on that very ubiquitous classic song.
Music that they were creating was something just phenomenal. All the band leaders were stars and virtuosos in their own right. Them to formulate an orchestra, they just raised the caliber of performance and musicianship to the proportion where there's a historical monument today for all of us to reflect back on. I came from like obscurity to being thrust into this environment of superstardom. There was always like a concert to perform. You would play in 2 or 3 nightclubs in the course of a night. You would play in small clubs, but then you play in huge venues, and you play at Madison Square Garden. We would play at the St. George's Hotel. We would play at the Corso. We would play in Jersey City, New Jersey. And then we would travel on weekends. So we'd go to Chicago, Miami. Eventually we came to the West Coast. So it was like my first experience visiting California, playing in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Palladium, playing in San Francisco. So this was like 1973, 1974, 75. I had the sort of the stamina to play 3 gigs in one night, 2 or 3 nights a week. I was a much younger person, so I had the energy level to keep the pace. I was with Ray Barretto for about 5 years. Ruben Blades was a phenomenally talented vocalist, musician. He played the guitar, and of course, like his compositions just speak volumes. So, we got to know each other just really, really well.
He was very close with Ruben Blades at the time, and they almost became roommates. Because the two of them were the only single guys in the band at the time.
Ruben Blades spoke Spanish and English, pretty easily, but Hector Lavoe spoke Spanish predominantly. So I just had to understand, what they were talking about. And eventually, I'd pick up a few words, put my vocabulary together. Then when I understood what they were saying, I wish I hadn't known so much Spanish. In 1976, I recorded 2 solo albums with Atlantic Records. And the first one was Mr. Flute, and the second one was Love Eyes. It was a result of performing with Ray Barretto that I came to the attention of the executives at Atlantic Records. Beginning of my solo career, performing R&B and jazz and funk. This was like a brave new world. It was like a huge experience. I went from being a side person to a recording artist, gaining great recognition at age 25. They weren't million sellers, but they still are exemplary recordings in the mind's eye of the general public and the audience, and they're still looking for copies of the album or on CD. After all, I did those recordings more than 30 years ago, and they've been out of print. I'm proud of the work that I did on the Mr. Flute album and the Love Eyes albums.
He is really influential, important in the salsa world, but a groundbreaking jazz flutist.
See, Artie is in a class by himself because Artie wasn't just a charanga flute player. He could play giant steps. He played with circle, he played with Chick Corea. He was Woody Shaw's right-hand man for years. He was a great jazz improviser, not just Latin music. That's why I love his playing.
Culturally, he had so many dimensions that he got from the black culture and the Latino culture, growing up in Philadelphia and spending so many years in New York City. So that's how he developed his chops, and so he had much more going for him, than most other straight-ahead jazz musicians.
Flute players are musicians, that double from playing saxophone, you know what I mean? Like a guy plays saxophone, he doubles on flute. There are very few just straight flute players. Those guys had to be really good. There weren't too many of them. And Art's one of those guys.
He gets a T. It could be, it could be like that. Every single one of those things are like a pearl. You could be a great reed player or whatever, you can be a monstrous player, but doublers can't do that. That's a real flute player doing what a great flute player can do.
For me, his absolute pinnacle of what he does is bebop jazz.
Please tell me what bebop jazz is.
Bebop is more based on the improviser, and it's a little more busy with more harmonic material.
Not everybody has the skills or the vocabulary to be able to be a bebop player. And Artie can definitely, he can swing.
One of the most amazing forms of jazz where anything goes with the highest level of concept. It's like you'll never hear the same song performed twice.
I try to perform all of the genres and other mainstream jazz artists in a versatile way. Covered the music with Stanley Clarke and Pharoah Sanders, Woody Shaw, Norman Connors. Winter in New York City was bone chilling, and I needed a change. When I came to California, I came here for a 2-week vacation. The weather was very pleasant. It didn't take much convincing for me to move out here. I arrived here in LA in 1986.
First lived in Hollywood, from what I understand, and a couple of musicians lived in the same building. That was Ray Carrion and Benji Torres, and they always mentioned how they kept hearing him. They heard him practice all day long.
Artie practices every day because of the level that he has to play at. He plays at a fantastic level, and he's reading music.
Began freelancing with a lot of musicians, among them Johnny and Freddie Crespo, Harry and Dee Dee Scorzo, with the Cache Orchestra, which eventually became the LA Salsa Society, and eventually met Brett Garland, and that became Bongo Logic.
I was 10 years old. The first time I saw and I heard the album Cha Cha Charanga. It was amazing. I'm sure if you have the record, you know that's Art Webb right on the cover. I was about 15, 16 years old, and Alfred was always trying to squeeze me into recordings and always trying to squeeze me into gigs, you know? I show up to the studio and there's Artie and there's Harry and there's Brett and I'm like, wow. And Freddie Crespo was there, Johnny Crespo was there, which, I had heard all these albums way before, I was a big fan. That was a really amazing experience to meet him, and more so as a 15-year-old or as a 16-year-old to be able to record with him, because we recorded live. It wasn't like one by one, No. You're in a big room, we record live. So if you mess up, it was like,
Very early on, I think my brother might have been talking about the first Cha Cha Charanga CD with Bongo Logic. And so I must have been, 18, 19 years old. That quality of musicianship, at that age, was a huge blessing for me. To hear Artie and not only his Latin chops, but his jazz chops.
The whole point of Bongo Logic was to make the sounds that I heard in my head and put Harry Scorzo out front with Art Webb. That's a pretty picture. I credit all these guys as being the guys who made it happen for little money in no time. Everything was a first take. There were only some percussion overdubs.
If you were aware of these elements, you can discern the differences. Oh, there he is doing the jazz thing. There's already now doing his classical thing, all in a typical 1-4-5 progression, un son montuno cubano. There he is doing all of these little influences, and in a way, in a mischievous kind of way, you know, como majadero.
There's a cut on one of those Bongo Logic albums. It's our version of Guantanamera. And it starts out with a little duo with a call and response between the flute and the violin. And at the beginning of Guantanamera, it starts out with bird chirps, and then the flute goes, and then the violin goes, and then the two of us in sixths together go, then the groove starts and you hear Freddie Crespo go, oh home. But anyway, we were in two separate rooms, two isolation booths, and we were trying to figure out how are we going to do this together because we can't see each other. And they were discussing, oh, maybe a click, and then saying, but it's out of tempo. And then somebody said, well, just make some noises so that we have some keystones. And Artie and I were sitting there while they were debating this, and we both agreed. We both just spontaneously, nah, we can do this. So we just went into the separate rooms, and we got it right on the first take because we play all the time together. We just had our rhythm and breathing, our musical breathing. We really understood each other's breath.
Well, Johnny Polanco and I became friends back in 1972, and we met in New York City in the club scene. He lived in the Bronx, I lived in Brooklyn. I started recording and performing with Johnny Polanco on a regular basis with Orchestra Guararé. He was just one of the greatest of the greats at that time, and this was like in the 70s.
Polanco was around playing, and he had just left the service. He was with the Marines for a while. He came out here, and apparently Artie had moved to the West Side from New York.
I saw Johnny performing at a Hollywood event, and I think it was a movie premiere, and I hadn't seen him since he had joined the Marine Corps. He served 20 years as a master sergeant. As he was retiring from the Marine Corps, he wanted to pursue music again. So Johnny said that he was going to continue performing music and become a band leader. And I said, well, we work together in New York, so it's a no-brainer to work with you here.
Polanco, one of the first guys that he integrated with him to develop the band was Artie, and I noticed that. They, partnered together, and all of a sudden, and it seemed so perfect because Polanco was like a big brother to Artie.
The band was officially established in February 1993. I performed with Johnny from that point forward, right up to this present time.
When I joined Johnny Polanco's band, he was Johnny Polanco's main man in the band. It didn't matter what song we'd be doing, it was always about Artie Webb.
He had a real nice, steady kind of an enterprise going with Johnny Polanco and Amistad. So he had, there was a long stretch where Artie wasn't driving. So he had a ride, he had a, steady work, and plus just a lot of support.
Tonight we're here at Floridita in Hollywood, and Johnny Polanco played here, 20 plus years, every Monday?
Floridita, of course, gave him and his band a great window of opportunity because, like anything in life, you have to be consistent. And Johnny was every Monday at Floridita, and that gave him the consistency that everybody needed. So, you miss Johnny on Thursday, you miss Johnny on Friday, you miss Johnny on Wednesday, you know that you will always see Johnny on Monday at Floridita.
People wait online. They don't care how long they have to wait, because on stage, it was Johnny and Artie and the whole band.
I think that anybody that knew Johnny knew that Artie was right behind. That was the team. It was never Johnny and Artie's doing another gig. No, Johnny's there, Artie's right there.
You get this big Puerto Rican brother with the belly, the cuatro in the trombone, and then you get the hyper kind of active brother with his flute, and they were inseparable.
It's not a friendship, it's a bond. It's two people that laugh, have great sense of humor, love to eat food, love to play music, love to perform.
After the gig, a dad needs to go eat, including myself once in a while. It was always a happy ending after a gig.
They got really close. Johnny really helped him. They were very, very close friends, and he came to rely on Johnny for a lot of things.
Johnny helped Artie, put him up. The relationship was beyond brotherhoods.
I feel like Artie is so pure. He was just a pure friend, just pure positive to Johnny, and Johnny was so lucky to have him as a friend. And then as the years went by and they were in the band together, Johnny, he was relying on Artie to help him.
And Artie was always there. And the instrumentation in Polanco's band over the years had changed, but Artie was there like a tree, always there. His sound was never the same if he didn't have Artie there.
Has always been, my best friend, like a big brother. And he never wanted anything to happen to me, and I never wanted anything to happen to him.
How are you? What's going on, baby? Good. How you doing, man? Good to see you. Good to see you, man.
When I first heard Art Webb got sick, it was a very sad moment for me. I mean, when I first heard it, of course, I thought the worst. I was extremely worried.
I didn't know Artie wasn't feeling well. I didn't know he was like really sick.
I knew it was serious, but I didn't know how serious.
When we were playing with Johnny, he developed congestive heart failure. And all of a sudden, there he was, very weak. His legs got swollen.
He was bad. And I've seen him in a physical position where he could barely walk. And carrying equipment, helping the band. He would carry a PA system, speakers and monitors, and he was doing outside of what he was supposed to do.
But with all that, we were still traveling. He was there. He was a trooper. He would never let go. He would not let people know that he was that sick. And he was really, really, really sick.
I heard he wasn't doing too good. I heard him losing weight. He maybe didn't even have like a shelter.
It was part of because he lost his home and because of the street life was too hard on him. He wasn't taking care of himself, obviously. He was taking care of the most basic things and not his health. And because he wasn't sleeping properly, his health declined, and one thing led to another, but it was caused by the homelessness.
You know, I didn't know that Arthur had gotten sick. I was actually a little upset that he didn't call me and call some of his old friends to, you know, to help him out.
You know, we were all like, what's up with Artie? Where is he? You know, worried about him, you know, when he would come back, you know.
I have a very close relationship with Johnny. We talk a lot on the phone. So when Artie disappeared, he called. He just trying to find out where Art was. And he was going all around town looking for Art.
Actually, he was in intensive care. Yes, it was very, very serious. He almost died.
My father had the same thing. His blood pressure was extremely high. I guess due to the stress, my blood pressure was quadruple the normal rate. My heart function was 25% in capacity of operating. So I spent several months in the hospital, better part of a year.
And at that point, Johnny stepped in and really helped the guy. I think he found him a place to live. If I'm not mistaken, I think Johnny became Artie's power of attorney for health, and Johnny literally helped him survive during those difficult years.
How were you able to pay for all your medical bills?
Never think we're going to get sick, and you never know. You never think anything's going to happen to you. Prior to becoming ill, I didn't have health insurance.
Johnny Polanco was doing this tribute for him, raising money, and so I went down there to contribute to that, be a part of that.
I went to the fundraiser. Thank God I was here in LA to be able to go and just go see him, to see that he's still there with us.
It was at the Granada. It was very well done. A lot of people showed up, as I knew they would, because Artie's Artie. You know, being there was like bittersweet because it was nice to see everyone. It was nice to see Artie getting support, but we all knew why we were there.
And when I saw Artie on stage during that time that he had been sick, you know, the first question is, are you going to get better?
There was a lot of people there, and you could tell that Art was loved.
Fundraiser was a tremendous success. Johnny told me later that he was very, very happy, and it seemed to be better than he expected.
Would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every person who supported me in the fundraiser that Johnny Polanco sponsored on my behalf, and I'm deeply grateful to everybody who came out to support me and just showed me a lot of love, a lot of support. It's been an emotional experience for me.
I don't think I know 100% or even 50% of how Artie experienced when Johnny died.
When Johnny passed away, Artie took a hit because Johnny was always there for him.
Deep inside our heart, you know, I'm sorry we lost Johnny Polanco, but we actually thought that we were going to lose Art Webb before Johnny Polanco.
Johnny Polanco passed away on June 2nd of 2015, and all of us are still having difficulty with his loss.
I got a phone call, say, hey, Johnny Polanco just passed away. And what do you mean? I just spoke to him at 1:30, 1:45. What are you talking about?
There was no warning. It's not like Johnny was in a bed for 5 months. One minute he's doing a gig and I have that picture of his last gig. A week later, he's in the hospital bed.
When he went to the hospital, they did the stand. He was out of the hospital Sunday. Monday night, he showed up.
He looked sick. I think Papo Rodriguez said, Johnny, what the fuck are you doing out of the hospital, man?
He showed up with Art Webb to pay the musicians. He didn't play that night, and he was here. That was Johnny.
It was a big blow for everyone in town. Johnny changed the way music was done in LA.
He was a very major anchor in the Latin community.
What could we have done to save Johnny Polanco's life?
Do you miss him?
Yes, absolutely. I miss my friend and brother, and we live in the same neighborhood. So the landscape has just changed.
For the longest, he just went along with Johnny. Once Johnny passes away, Artie was left in a state of shock, but at the same time, profound loss spiritually, financially.
They were brothers, man. I mean, I never seen a man suffer so much that Artie did when Johnny passed away. I never seen anybody suffer the way he is. And I'm telling you this right now, Mark, from the bottom of my heart. Up to today, he's still suffering.
I don't own a car. I drive, but I don't own a car. The last car that I had was a junker. All of us need reliable transportation, so I just have to get ahead of the game so that I can buy a car. But my instinct from living in New York City was to rely on the public transportation that exists.
Is it a pain in the butt sometimes? You know, all-night gig from 6 o'clock p.m. all the way to you get home, I believe, around 5 a.m., 6 a.m.?
Yes. For me, that very last bus that brings me directly home, those services start up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, I'll spend like a few hours eating club sandwiches at Denny's before I get the bus that comes directly to my house. A lot of times it's cumbersome, and I'll not only get home at 5 or 6 in the morning, I'll end up getting home at 7 or 8 in the morning.
Yeah, that would be great, man. If you could help Art to get a record together, like have him call me. I'd love to, help him do with that. Yeah, it'd be great.
I don't know anything of that. I knew film world.
Yeah, we could get it together. You know, raise some money. It ain't gonna cost that much.
I
And
just
get a
think
place.
it's just studio time.
It's just studio time, and he's got to get the songs. There's tons of engineers that would do it, and he's just got to get the songs and get the compositions and the concept.
Well, he said he has it already.
Great.
He hasn't been able to generate the money.
Well, he should come by, talk to me, and let's just see what he.
You know,
Be nice.
you know, I'm going to hold you up to that because I think my friend needs a help from
Yeah.
another dear old friend.
Yeah, it would be great. It'd be fun too.
I called Stanley. It was a reunion of two Philadelphia friends. Now, we discussed doing a recording project for myself, and we started tossing around some ideas as far as what kind of ensemble I'd like to use, how large, how small, the choices of material. So we're moving forward, but putting all the elements together. From our last interview, my workload has increased. I've been performing with Bobby Escoto and Conjunto Afrosón and the Granada LA All-Stars. Also, I've been performing with Alberto Gonzalez and Salsa Caliente. I've had the opportunity to go on several cruises performing with Jose Alberto El Canario. I've been performing with the Latin Rhythm Boys, who are Johnny Polanco's cousins.
Artie, I mean, you're busy.
Yes, I'm thankful to my friends for keeping me in mind, that's for sure. Given me like a good sense of longevity. And my health is good and steady. I have my regular regimen of medications a day, including Xarelto. But I'm feeling good, exercising. I joined the LA Fitness, and several times a week I exercise on the treadmill. I am now like a regular Uber customer. Now for the volume of work that I do, I have to cover a lot of territory. Now I'm a tried and true Uber customer with rewards. No longer getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. Now I get home at a reasonable hour after doing work.